My name is Ted Butler. I'm the Director of Veteran Services for the town of Middleton, and we're doing an interview tonight with Bernard Pothier, who was a member of the Bataan Death March during World War II. Bernie, when and where did you enter the military?
In August 14th, 1940, at the Boston Army base down on the waterfront in South Boston.
Okay.
You familiar with that?
I am, down near the Fargo building.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, where did they send you for basic training?
Okay, my basic training took place in the Philippines, the island of Luzon, the small island in the Philippines called Cregidor. You familiar with that? People are familiar with Cregidor. It's a small island right at the base of Manila Bay. So I spent 3 months there, basic training.
So how did you get your specialty? Were you specialized after that?
After that, yes, radio operator, they did train me at Clark Field after, yeah. After Pearl Harbor, we knew about Pearl Harbor, and we knew they'd probably attack us. But we were waiting for so the guy in charge, his name was MacArthur, a real wacko as far as we're concerned. Waiting for you to give an order, give us something to do, tell us, the poor guys in the airplane, the command of the airplane, waiting for the command to get up there and protect it. They knew the Japs were heavy in Taiwan, Formosa, and that's where they're coming from, about 400 miles away. Mm-hmm. And we did practically no preparation whatsoever. And I had a first-class view because the radio thing is right on the edge of the field. We had planes all around us. The Japs said later, they took a look at the field, they said, "Oh boy, a turkey shoot." The planes are all lined up, down they go. I ran back and forth. We took equipment out, and brought it into the jungle. Meanwhile, we're being bombed and straight. It's a mess, Things are blowing up, and it was real bad that first day. That was about 8 or 10 hours after Pearl Harbor, and then we backed. We stayed there 2 days in that area, and then we backed into Bataan, Peninsula of Bataan, which extends out into the Pacific Ocean, as you know. And we get a message. It was getting pretty bad. Everything was running out: food, medicine, but we had plenty of ammunition. MacArthur used to complain. He sent a message over, "You guys are spending more than they spent a whole of World War I," he said. But you can't eat ammunition. Right. So we get the word, "You are to surrender." We said, "Surrender? What for? We don't want to surrender, Or if you don't surrender, you'll be court-martialed." I told you that. Imagine not knowing if you're going to live the next day, and they're telling you you're going to be court-martialed. Who the hell is going to court-martial you? No such thing as superiority. None. They were the same. Everybody was the same.
Equal.
Struggling to exist. That's what it amounts to, right?
Yeah.
So anyhow, we smashed our rifles and equipment and everything that we could. And they said we had to gather at a certain point on the trail there, Mm-hmm. So we did. My outfit was about 100 men or so. We were waiting there, and here comes the Japanese down the trail, with their bayonets and rifles. And they come up to you and start jabbing in Japanese, put the bayonet out. The Japs yelled it, screamed at us, and lined us up and marched us down the trail where everybody was meeting in the tip of Bataan, the area called Marvelis. very tip. The Japanese were taken by surprise because we had, on Bataan, they had about 20 or 30,000 Philippine soldiers from the Philippine Army. They're all recruited, all drafted, poorly trained, poorly equipment. They'd only been in the service a few weeks before the war started.
Oh, wow.
So the Japanese were surprised. They had them, and plus they had about 15,000 Americans, you know. And they put them all together. We marched up the peninsula, and it took us, I think, about 6 days to make that march, you know. And people were dying left and right, and there were every so often there'd be an artesian well would pass these little villages with water bubbling up, and they'd set us in a field where we could see that. Some of the guys would break, you know, water is extremely important in a situation like that. It's live or die. Some of the guys would break away and they'd shoot them right then and there or bayonet them. Nobody got the water, nobody. Every second you're out there, you're thinking, make yourself exist for the next day. What do you get?
So you marched up to the camp.
We got to go to one, which was a death camp. You know, here comes all these Filipinos and American, and you know, they were sick to start off with. You know, everybody's got dysentery, and I mean dysentery, it means you go 20, 30, 40 times a day. Lousy food or no food. Water was one little pump, and you had to line up. Imagine thousands of guys lining up there trying to get a little water. It took all day if you got any.
Yeah.
And people were dying left and right by the hundreds. And we had to carry the dead, dig a big hole and throw them all in one hole, you know. That went on day after day after day, thousands. I don't know how many.
Yeah. How long were you in the camp before you got transferred someplace else?
I was in that camp about 4 months.
4 months? And then where did you
I was
go?
transferred to Manila, to a prison right in the middle of the city called Bilibid. It was an old Spanish dungeon type thing with thick walls and chambers underneath, you know, just like you'd think it would be.
Right, prison.
Built by the Spanish 150 years before, you know.
Right.
So I was there for a while. I would go down, we were loading ships down the dock, all the stuff from Japan. Finally, we're going to Japan. They're marching us through the city. Manila, in case you don't know, Manila's a big, big city. Huge.
The capital of the Philippines.
Yeah.
Right.
In the Philippines. They're marching us through the cities down the docks. And there's a jukebox in the sidewalk. And it's playing God Bless America full volume because, you know, we look pretty slumped over. They gave us, we never forgot that. Filipinos are there. The Japs didn't have a clue what that was. They had no clue about Kate Smith. And I'll never forget that. That's one of the highlights.
Kind of a pick-me-up.
That was the only good part of the whole damn thing. Put us on the ships, you know.
So they marched you down, they had you putting supplies on the ships to go to Japan.
Yeah.
And then eventually you were on the ships to go to Japan, right?
In Formosa. And we were loading stuff for going to Japan, you know.
Work detail.
Yeah. And there were ships in, we knew they were having a hard time. There were ships in the harbor with holes in them, you know, been shot up. Submarines were raising hell at that time, you know. Okay, and then we stopped at Hong Kong for a little bit, and again, just unloading, and then finally made our way to southern Japan, Kyushu, not far from Nagasaki. And then
So you were captured in December, the month of December, right?
Yeah.
In Bataan. What month was it when you started working in the mines in Japan?
What?
What month?
What month? Oh, we worked 1944, 1945.
2 years?
Yeah.
Okay, so you were in Japan for 2 years?
Until we saw the atomic bomb. We happened to be off that day, saw the atomic bomb going over Nagasaki, but we did not know. We didn't know. We don't know anything about atomic. We said, boy, the B-29s are really suckered it to them today. They were flying over every day in bombing. The plane over, and we see a guy bail out. Yeah, with the shooter. He dropped down. He landed in the camp. Everybody gathered around. He turned out to be a reporter from a Chicago newspaper, Chicago Daily News, Chicago Times or something. And he told us what was going on. Up to this point, we didn't know. Told us about atomic bomb, and he told us that the Americans had been prepared to invade, and where were they going to land? Guess, Kyushu, right where we were.
Is that right?
Boy, that would have been a slaughter, I'm telling you. Because the Japanese were prepared, man, woman, and child, to fight. And when they fight, they are good fighters. They're all prepared. They had a broom or a shovel or anything, they were to fight. And so there would have been tremendous amount of weight. I think the Americans would have lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers in those later. Because there was a big railroad depot not far from the camp. We went there, and we had guys with us that had been in the railroads, civilians, so they knew what it was all about. So we gathered 3 or 4 old cars and a beat-up old locomotive. We rounded up about 30 or 40 guys, and we got on the train, and some of the guys that were engineers went up in the locomotive with the Jap drivers there to make sure everything was on the up and up, And we made our way down 150 miles. It was difficult because Americans had bombed out bridges, so we finally got near that airfield, and we stopped, and the engineer said, "It's up that road a few miles." They never said miles, kilometers, right? So we got out and we stomped up that road, and finally we come to a barrier. The Marines had erected a barrier across the road with sandbags and everything, and machine guns, And on the bullhorn they said, "Stop." So, we had Japanese clothes on, and we said, "We're American PWs." They had a little conference, they said, "Send 1 man forward." So we did, and the Marines said, "Come on in." We ran up to the Marines, I told you that. We hugged them, we kissed them, and then we said, "Where's the food?" On the ship, if we had insisted, we should have flown back. Put us on a troop ship.
You remember the name of the troop ship?
What?
Do you remember the name of the troop ship?
Yeah, it was like General Hughes or something like that.
Okay.
Took 3 weeks to go to Vancouver because we had some Canadian troops too.
So you went from Manila to Vancouver
Yes.
before you came down to the United States?
To Vancouver, yeah, that's right. So I went to Fort Devens and got checked out there,
One of the most famous patrols that the Sea Dog made was into the Sea of Japan and through the minefields. And it was known as Operation Barney. Barney Siegloff was a famous skipper from the submarine Tautog.
Okay.
And the Tautog was one of the top submarines that had a great record. So Barney Siegloff eventually became a division commander, I think, at the time. the Wahoo submarine, which had a hot record, and the skipper's name on there was
Morton.
Morton.
Yeah.
And they called him Mush because I think they nicknamed him Mushmouth Rebel or something like that. But anyway, he was a skipper, and a hot skipper, and he was famous for down the throat shots and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, he got sunk in the Sea of Japan.
Yeah.
That was the end of Mush Morton. So this Operation Barney was set up for the revenge of the Wahoo.
Oh.
So in other words, the shipping was so scarce out there at that time, there wasn't many ships left.
Right.
And our job was to cut off the supply lines to Japan. So the only place that there was many ships left would be in the Sea of Japan, between Japan and Russia and Korea in there. The problem was the southern entrance was mined.
Yeah.
The northern entrance had a destroyer base, which they didn't think they could get through.
Yeah.
So eventually they came up with this mine detecting gear,
Right.
and which technically I don't understand the whole thing. But anyway, we had this mine detecting gear, and we went through the minefields, nine submarines. That was considered the most successful wolf pack of American forces in World War II. So we went through the minefields, 3 each day, for 3 days in a row, and you had to wait 3 days as you went up the coast before you could fire on anything unless it was a cruiser or bigger, to give all the submarines a chance to get into position before you fired. So if I remember correctly, and I'd have to check my numbers, but I think we were up there, I think 28 days, and we sank, all the submarines sank 32 ships up there.
Wow.
They were small,
Yeah.
mostly cargo ships. And I think one of them was a Russian ship that we sank.
Oops.
Not our submarine, but another one. And the Sea Dog sank the majority. I mean, we sank 6. So we had the highest number of ships sunk. But we paid a price, and we lost one submarine. We lost the Bonefish up there.
Okay.
In fact, we were having a movie. Our skipper was the senior skipper, and then he was in charge of the whole wolf pack, and then it was broke down into 3 sections. And so this skipper, I forget his name now, but anyway, he had requested permission to go into some harbor or something, if I remember correctly. And we were watching a movie that afternoon, and we could hear the depth charges of bombs going off. And we were all laughing, we were saying, they're getting a few we figured it was them getting depth charged. Well, they did get depth charged, and they got sunk, So I guess if you look back on it, you might say, was them 9 ships worth one submarine? Probably not at the end of the war like that, but we didn't know what was going to happen. So the big thing then was, how do we get out of there? So they had 3 choices. They could go back through the minefields to get out, which they didn't think was a good choice. They could go out through the, I forget the name of the peninsula, north of Japan, where the destroyer base was. Or if they didn't dare to do that, we could turn into Russia at that time. Russia hadn't declared war yet on them, so we would be in internment.
Oh.
So they decided they would go through the destroyer base. So we went out. I can't remember. It was all 8 submarines went out one night or one afternoon, whatever it was. I remember it was so foggy you couldn't see the bow of the submarine, and we were all doing flank speed. Went out and never made a contact. I think there was one ship made a contact with some merchant submarine. They gave them the light, and they gave them back some light, and on we went. So we just cruised out of there. So,
Wow.
but that's the thing that we got from Admiral Lockwood. That was actually Admiral Lockwood's project, and we were called the Mighty Mine Dodgers. And there was a movie made on it, I think with Ronald Reagan, Hellcats of the Sea.
Okay.
And my name is in the book. I have the book.
No kidding.
I got the book here somewhere, so I'll show it to you.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Please state your name, address, and age.
My name is Paul Woodbury Jr. I live at 128 Liberty Street in Middleton. I'm 64 years old.
And when and where did you enter the military, Paul?
I entered the military through Salem, Massachusetts in 1964. I joined the Navy.
And why did you join the military? What branch did you choose?
So I figured I'd get an education in the Navy. I signed up in the Navy for 6 years.
And where were you sent for basic training, and what was that like?
I went to the Great Lakes in Illinois for basic training in November of 1964 and departed there after A school in, I believe it was April or May of 1965. So I managed to go through the whole winter.
So your specialty was engineering or machinist?
Engineering, I was in the basically engineering gang, if you wanted to call it that. Our rate was called machinist mate, which we ran machines. And once again, it had everything to do with the propulsion of the ship, with the exception of the boilers. The boilers were a separate rate on the wall in between us and them.
And what was your first duty station, and what were some of your duties?
Well, after I get out of A school, and I apologize for this, I should have brought it up. I went from A school directly to nuclear power school down in Bainbridge, Maryland, for the clerical version of nuclear power school, the academic version of it. And from there, I left and went to Windsor Locks, Connecticut, for the actual hands-on training on board a mock-up of a submarine's hull, a nuclear power plant itself. And so that was one of my first, I won't say duty station, but it was additional advanced training. Once I finished that, I was on board a fossil fuel destroyer out of Newport, Rhode Island. I never got on board a nuclear vessel, but I was on board a destroyer. Tin can sailor, as they called us.
Did you have any other duty assignments throughout your military service?
Actually, no. Once I got out of school, it was a couple of years doing all the schools, and then I spent a little over 4 years on board the Lloyd Thomas, the destroyer. We were stationed on in Newport, Rhode Island. We made many trips home to the Caribbean.
So how important was serving in the military to you?
Serving in the military was real important to me at the time, like I said, where I couldn't go to college, and I really didn't have the desire to go to college. I needed to get away from small town and go out and see the world. Good time for me. It gave me a lot of insight to the world. I get out of the service and went through a technical school on the military program, so I made use of that. Got an education there.
So it did affect the rest of your life to a certain extent.
In many ways, many ways. As I said, it helped me mature, helped me learn what I could and couldn't do. I didn't think I could have handled college, but yet I made it through nuclear power school, which was like 2 or 3 years of college all wrapped up in 2 6-month courses. I made it through, so I was really proud of myself and had a much better feeling about myself, so it really helped. When and where did you enter the military, Ted?
Actually, I joined the United States Naval Reserve when I was a senior in high school down in Jacksonville, Florida, primarily to avoid being drafted. My father was in the Navy, so I decided that, maybe the Navy might be a good opportunity for me to join.
Where were you sent for your basic training, and what was it like, Ted?
Well, when I joined under what's called the 2x6 program.
Excuse me.
And the 2x6 program required that you spend 2 years on active duty and 6 years total in the reserves. What they forgot to tell me was that I had to do the 2 years active duty at the beginning of the 6 years, and I had planned on doing it at the end of the 6 years because I wanted to go to college.
Uh-huh.
So when I graduated from high school down in Jacksonville, Florida, I started drilling at Jacksonville Naval Air Station in a reserve unit, and I started going to school at Jacksonville University. And at the end of the first year, they sent me orders for 2 years active duty, and I said, no, I don't want to go on active duty. So I had to sign a paper saying that for every year that I was deferred to go to college, they would add 2 more years onto my reserve enlistment.
Ooh, huh.
So by the time 4 years went by, that's 8 years
Reserves.
on top of the 6.
Oh.
So when I got through, I graduated from college. I ended up transferring from Jacksonville University to Texas A&I College in Kingsville, Texas. And when I graduated there in 1963, I received my orders for 2 years active duty.
Okay.
Unfortunately, at this point in time, I had rose in rank from an E1 to an E4, and I was a third-class radioman.
Okay.
And so the orders sent me to an oiler out of Galveston, Texas, as the only radioman on board.
Oh, boy.
So I immediately decided that maybe I should try to take the test for officer candidate school. Finally retiring in 1993 with 35 years in the Naval Reserve. Started out as an E1,
Right.
ended up as an 06
Right.
captain. Well, I had a lot of memorable experiences while I was in the service, and just to touch on one of them, while I was over at Westpac in one of the Westpac cruises, we had a chance to go up into the North China Sea between Japan and Russia
Right.
and China up there. And it was in the middle of winter, 70-foot waves coming over the bow of the aircraft carrier,
Oh,
icicles hanging off the
Yeah.
antennas and the flight deck,
yeah.
losing planes off the flight deck even though they were secured.
Oh,
The winds and the water just too much.
yeah.
So that was quite an experience. I had to, order some of my men out on the catwalks to chop the ice off the whip antennas in order to communicate.
Right.
And of course, not wanting to say, you do it, I'm not going,
Yeah.
I had to be out there with them.
Oh,
So
boy.
it was brutal.
I can only imagine. We saw many high seas, but nothing near 70 feet. It's like,
We did lose some aircraft and some pilots. We had a couple of planes that went to Japan, for whatever reason that didn't make it. They ended up in the water and lost at sea. We had a couple planes coming back that had trouble landing on the flight deck because of the pitch and roll of the flight deck,
right,
and
yeah.
ended up smashing into the crane on the flight deck and having to push them over the side.
Oof.
So we've had a lot of experiences.
Any additional comments you'd like to make? Something you'd like to say that we didn't ask? Anything else going on?
I think that, if I had to do it all over again, I'd probably do it the same way.
Yeah.
Serving my country and serving my community and serving my nation
Yeah.
are admirable traits and things that I
Absolutely.
would probably want to do if I had to do it all over again.
My name is Eugene LeBlanc.
And when and where did you enter the military, Eugene?
I lived in Lynn at that time, and it was 1943 when I was drafted into the military, into the Army.
And where did they send you for basic
Well,
training?
they sent me down to Mississippi, which I think is the last place you want to be.
Yeah.
So, because there were so many coral snakes when you took those hikes, that a lot of times some of the guys used to get bitten, and they're very poisonous.
Okay.
They make you real sick, real bad. So we were make sure that we had our leggings on.
And what was your specialty during the military?
Well, I was trained in building bridges, Bailey bridges, floating pontoon bridges. The next thing was planting and activating mines, and also deactivating mines and booby traps and stuff like that, which I was very fortunate to have learned a lot of particular different kinds of mines, So I was very fortunate that way.
So where was your first duty station? Where did you go after you got through with the specialty camp and the bivouac?
After Tennessee,
Yeah.
I was shipped over to England, and there we went to Bristol, England, and I took an additional 6 weeks of training on the British anti-tank mines.
And where did you go in France?
I landed in Le Havre, and late in '44.
How long before you actually saw combat?
Well, it wasn't too long after that. They shipped us to Alsace-Lorraine. I don't know if you know about that. It's Strasbourg and
Between France and Germany?
between France and Germany.
Right.
It's right where the Maginot Line faces the Siegfried Line. And over there, it so happens that they had a German division surrounded. So they wanted to keep them there, so they wouldn't be able to come out to combat. So my outfit, plus a lot of other outfits, we were delegated to plant minefields all around that division, that's German division. So that was one of our chores for about 2-3 weeks. That's a couple of weeks anyways. We done that. We planted the mines, and we all left because we thought the Germans were beginning to bombard us with artillery again. Like every so often they bombard us with artillery. So naturally the Maginot Line was right near there, so we just went in one of those bunkers. You had to walk. You have to walk fast though, but we couldn't run through the minefields. We had to walk
Carefully.
So we walked into the big bunkers. They're huge bunkers. They go underground about, I don't know how many, 2, 3, 4 stories. The Maginot Line has rails underneath there with trains going from one bunker to the next, all facing Germany. But it didn't do them any good anyway because they went through Belgium.
You ever get any break from combat, like recreation and
No, we didn't.
time off?
No, well, we get enough to go take a bath in one of these big tents. These tents they put up pipes and showers, and you go through there, and you take a shower, and you take your bath, and then you go down the other end, and they give you some clothes. If it fits you, you're lucky, and if it, sometimes it looks like a bag on you, but anyways, you get something clean, you know?
How many days between showers did you have?
Oh, sometimes it was, more than
Weeks?
weeks. You took, but, you know, we washed up just the same, you know, we had to keep clean.
Right.
You have to wash your feet, and, because that's most vulnerable part of your body. When it's cold like that, you know, you get 20 below zero and 10 below zero and 0 and whatever, and we hit that weather. That was the worst weather that they ever experienced in Europe, was in 1945.
Never got
January.
frostbite?
Oh, yeah, in fact, my little finger, I had frostbite on my little finger, my earlobe, and my little toe, my left side. Yeah, so.
So when were you discharged then? 40?
46, but before I came, I stayed in France I came back from Germany, I came back to France,
Okay.
and they needed interpreters. So I spoke fluent French, so I was fortunate that way, and I spoke half-decent German. So they asked me if I'd stay with a certain officer to acquire from the railroads, French railroads, railroad cars and locomotives, you know, and because we had to dismantle all the pipelines.
Right.
We had enough German prisoners to do that. I went home and visited my parents and my father, you know, and my brothers and sisters. It was really nice. But at the time, you know, when I come back, that was months later. So the big hullabaloo was all over. The ones that first came home, they got was more response. You know.
So you were on the tail end of
I was at the tail end,
coming
naturally.
in. Yeah.
I went through the normal procedure, basic training. This was coming along in late '44 that I completed my basic training and was put on the ship, sent overseas as a casual individual to be assigned to some place. We landed, I don't remember exact dates, but we landed in England, took a train overnight from Liverpool to Southampton, and we sat in Southampton in a boat without any food for 3 days because they had weather. And this was in the fall. I went through the normal procedure of getting first to France. We went into Le Havre shortly after it had been opened up. Le Havre was devastated. Sunken ships everywhere as we come in and so forth, because earlier guys had done their work. And I got assigned up into where the 8th Infantry was. They had just relieved the 1st Division in there, and we got handled down through the echelon to a company finally on the 8th Infantry. I was on the front about 7 days, 6 to 7 days before the bulge. We got moved from the Hurtgen Forest. Well, it's right on the edge of the Siegfried line. We worked our way up, and we were facing some pillboxes And we had weather, and the air support was practically nil for the whole week. We were pinned down in there, and we've been sitting through mortar fire constantly. There was, well, I was the fourth hole in on the left flank, and I was, when we captured the final hole, it was, we too seemed to be sheltered from their mortar fire. The other 3 holes were empty. And then the Germans come along one night, surrounded us. In the morning, we woke up and there they were with their guns. When we got to Magdeburg, we were on the outskirts, and again it was barns that we were staying in, but it was a completely enclosed facility, like you've seen pictures of the barbed wire and all of this. Well, that was there, and we did get some imitation coffee then, so we had a little bit to eat. From Magdeburg, as the Russians closed in, they decided they got to move us again. And so we moved. That time, the move was only about 50 miles that we were off. And we didn't stay there but about a week, and they started sending us out on work details. We were south of Hamburg, in a town called Wilkenthal. And I spent the rest of my days there until an American column come in and took over. And we got in trucks the next day and came to La Havre. When I hit the States, finally got to Devon's, and they weighed us, I was 89 pounds. And I'd been eating for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So we didn't get treated any better than any other prisoner that they had there, Jews or anyone. Only difference, there weren't ovens.
I don't think that I was in. I was in a battalion. We didn't have any casualties, and we weren't in any battles. So with that understood, you could probably appreciate what I'm going to say. But I was in a signal corps in Cape Crowder, Missouri, back in 1944, after I had my basic training in the tank corps at Fort Knox, Kentucky. When I was at Fort Knox, I had 5 weeks of radio school, and with that experience, it helped me later on when I was in the signal when I got in the signal corps. But in any case, what I wanted to say is there were 628 enlisted men, 34 officers in a signal battalion, in this particular signal battalion. And the reason for it was to be service a headquarters like the War Department or the British Ministry, War Ministry, or armies, and or several armies. And therefore, when we left the States back in 1944, we got to Glasgow, and from there in we spent time in England, and still waiting to be assigned to somewhere in Europe. And eventually we pulled in Le Havre, France, on LSTs. So we got to eventually Lille, France, and that was going to be our headquarters. But instead of taking over a major headquarters like the intent was, the original intent, it was to, they had to break up the detachments into several groups. And so they had one detachment go to Paris, one going to Antwerp, one going to Brussels, Charleroi, I was in Charleroi, and Mons, Amiens, France, and Maastricht in Holland. So the whole thing was, our battalion was to take care of all the major communications in all of Belgium and part of France, northern France, and part of southern Holland. And so we had about something like 17 detachments. We were all split over different areas. So in any case, our job was to maintain military cables and communications to not only ordnance and supply people, also for the weather stations for the Air Force in different areas. And because at that time, the B-47s were still running to Berlin, and they needed supply support and so forth. But in any case, most of the work, there were two items in Charleroi where I was. There was a message center, and there was also what they call the cable head. Now the cable head is where I was assigned, and that job was to take communications from other groups. Someone, for instance, in England, wanted to have a line to, let's say, somewhere close to the front, like advanced sections. They had to put a new line in, and therefore all these different switching stations would get alerted to connect that particular line to a certain pair. Anyway, but that was part of my job. But the main thing is, in France and Belgium, most of the communications was all underground. There were no telephone poles. If there were any poles, they were near a gully. But all the telephone lines were mostly all underground. So if there was a problem, and in fact there was a lot of problems, because there was saboteurs that would bomb they lift up like a head, a steel head, and throw a bomb in there, and it would disrupt the communication system. But anyway, that's my story. And I don't know.
Well, anyways, to start off with, I was in high school when I went over and took the aviation cadet exams. In December '42, they changed the requirements for aviation cadets. It used to be 2 years of college. In '42, December '42, they changed it to 2 years or its equivalent. Now, the equivalent consisted of a long series of examinations. If you pass the examinations, you equaled your 2 years of college. Then you go take a physical and so forth. 12 of us from my high school class went over in December of '42, and six of us, I think, passed the exam. So then when you come back to your physical, 6 of us went back to the physical, and 4 of us passed the physical. So anyways, they're supposed to wait till you get out of high school before they call you. No. The Army has different ideas. They called me in March, 3 months before they're supposed to call me. My mother had a fit because I never graduated from high school, but I went in the Army. Now, I'll talk to you about aviation cadets. Nobody knows anything about aviation cadets. I can see why. But here's my old hat. I wonder if this fits. It's kind of tight. You can pass it around. That's an aviation cadet hat. What you do is you go to Army Basic. We all had Army Basic. 2.5 months of digging trenches and putting up barbed wire and climbing poles. And then
some of those.
we went to college. They sent us to college, which was a sort of a pre-flight. I went to Syracuse University. That was just great, Syracuse University. And then after 3 or 4 months, I forget, they send us to everybody. The academics are rather tough because in my squadron, about half of them were college graduates. And I had a roommate who had a master's in chemistry, for God's sakes. And there I am going to classes trying to keep up with these guys. It's darn near impossible. I went to every makeup class they had, 7 to 10 every night, and I was there. The only way to keep up. But anyways, now you go to classification center. Everybody gets down there and you take all these, that was Nashville, Tennessee. You take all these exams, psychomotor exams, see how coordinated you are, put you in the machine and spin you around, turn you up, different attitudes. That's what it basically is. And that decides whether you're going to be a pilot, bombardier, a navigator, or bombardier. Okay, I got classified as a pilot. The other fellows, I learned, they weren't with me, they were after me. Only one classified as a pilot, the other two were bombardier and navigator. So then you go to pre-flight, Maxwell Field, which is a very disciplined place. We went everywhere in formation. You could not go anywhere without being in a formation. And they weren't happy with that. You had to dog trot the whole time you were in formation. So they did a lot of exercise. Okay, after pre-flight, the whole class broke up again. You go to your different flying schools. And that's where you make friends along the way. And you like to stay with them, but this is where everybody divided. You go in another primary flight training, PT-19s, if you're familiar with Mountain, Arkansas. And then basic training down in Cortland, Alabama. The thing I remember about Cortland, Alabama is the commander of that base didn't like bugle calls. So instead he played swing music. Now, String of Pearls was reveille. They got up to String of Pearls. And you marched off to the chow line with Tuxedo Junction. And that's the way it went for the 5 calls. We had these really beautiful swing numbers. And it kept everybody happy while we're marching around the place. Then after basic flying, we get introduced to night flying and formation. You go to advanced. That's where the class breaks up again. Now you go to single engine training or multi-engine training. The single engine guys are going to train for fighters. The other fellows trained for bombers. I went to bomber school out in Indiana. If you got time, I got a little story that happened in Indiana that I told Rita Kelly about a couple of weeks ago. It's kind of a funny story, but I don't want to bore you all.
It's not boring.
Huh?
I'd like to hear it.
You like to hear it? Okay. You ever hear of Boone Grove, Indiana? Nobody else has it either. Nobody in the country has heard of Boone Grove, Indiana. All right. This phase of advanced training, we're flying twin engine trainers. The purpose of it is formation flying low level, because they discovered that the Germans have radar, but if you get low enough, they can't see you. And so we had these cross countries. There wasn't enough to go single. You had to fly formation, never above 200 feet. Well, you can't navigate under 200 feet because you can't see where you're going. Everything's on headings in time. Well, anyway, so we're all formation. We had 5 airplanes. The instructor, I think the instructor was leading, I'm not, but I'm on his right wing, and another fellow is on my right wing. And we're cruising along. We're coming down from Iowa, headed south toward Indiana. This was the last leg of our 3-day trip. Well, a rainstorm came up, a thunderstorm, and the instructor said, take it down, the visibility is always better near the ground. So we took it down, and it starts raining where you can't see the airplane you're flying formation with. You're just seeing his wingtip, and you're, good Lord, you gotta stay with him, which we're doing, and then all of a sudden, boom, the airplane goes, wow, wow, wham, 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 wow, all kinds of noise, and it starts to slide on. I didn't know what happened, but slide, and just fortunately, we came out of the rainstorm. The airplane's at this altitude, and we're about 100 feet in the air. And I said, I'm flying this. I don't want to hit the ground that attitude. I said, it's better to hit the ground level. So the only way I could keep it level, because my engine on the left side had all the power, and that power lifts that wing. And it lifts this wing. This wing is half gone. The guy on my right side chopped it off with his prop.
He was keeping close.
And he got the aileron, so I didn't have any aileron control. The only thing I could do is hard rudder and chop the engine. And when you do that, you're going to go down. And sure enough, there was a field right in front of me, and I just headed down there, and I'm about 50 feet in the air, and I yell at my co-pilot, Tasculus, his name was. I says, jettison the canopy, because somewhere they trained us that if you land in an unproven field, a soft field, get rid of the canopy because the airframe may twist and you'll never get out with the canopy on, and they catch fire quite often. So I said, jettison the canopy. I yelled at him, jettison the canopy, and we hit the ground. Well, it's Indiana, and it's summertime, and the ground is soft, and the corn is high, and everything started coming in the cockpit, up over the nose, over the engine. Pretty soon, it came to a stop, and we're sitting up to more than our waist in corn. I thought I did a good job of keeping under control and getting that thing in the ground. And he leans over, looks to me on his left. He says, you and your GD canopy. That's all he said.